What makes a real villain? Is it just being an antagonistic force, or are you just an obstacle for our hero to overcome? Do mental issues excuse a character's terrible actions, or are they still responsible for their villainous traits? Is it right to root against or even hate someone who suffers from severe mental illness? Or are we just distracting ourselves, blaming the so-called villain while ignoring our protagonist's crooked ways? That's the dynamic between Chuck and Jimmy McGill, flawed brothers who make each other suffer, yet only one's seen as the villain, the one we blame, while the other often dodges accountability. We root for one and judge the other. Despite Chuck McGill's mental illness, we view him as the bad guy in Better Call Saul, and that makes us dislike or even hate him. But why? Is this hate exaggerated or just plain wrong? No mistake, Chuck McGill isn't a good man. He's lied, manipulated, hurt, and sabotaged his own brother, all for his pride and ego. But how much of his behavior can we excuse or dismiss because of his mental illness? Does Chuck deserve the hate for Jimmy's transformation into Saul Goodman? Why is he so hell-bent on destroying his own brother, Jimmy McGill? And why do we, the viewers, hate Chuck so much? We rarely see Chuck and Jimmy's early days in Better Call Saul. Across the show, we get just 11 scenes of their past, and the very first one screams Chuck's need for control, a trait that defines him forever. Picture this: teenage Chuck reading The Adventures of Mabel to little Jimmy. When Jimmy interrupts, asking if the main character will be okay, Chuck snaps, "She'll be fine!" Jimmy cuts in again, "How do you know?" And Chuck barks, "Just listen!" This simple scene sets the stage. Chuck's gotta be in charge, especially over Jimmy. Years later, Jimmy's arrested for that infamous Chicago sunroof. He meets Chuck, now a hotshot lawyer, and begs him to work his magic, cheat the system, and spring him from jail. This moment's huge. Jimmy's first instinct, after not seeing Chuck for 5 years, is to ask, what loopholes can we exploit? He wants his brother to help him scam his way out of jail. Here's Slippin' Jimmy in full glory. After years of scheming, stealing, and exploiting innocence, he runs to Chuck, who he hasn't spoken to in ages, just to save his skin. And Chuck, he never lets it go. He'll always see Jimmy as Slippin' Jimmy, nothing more. After freeing Jimmy, Chuck brings him to Albuquerque, getting him a mailroom job at HHM, his law firm, hoping he'll go straight. Chuck convinces the firm to hire Jimmy as a mailroom assistant, and Jimmy actually turns his life around. He drops the schemes, the plots, the exploitation. He goes clean. Slippin' Jimmy is gone, and Chuck's finally proud. Jimmy McGill's got a respectable job. If only that was the end of their story. But no, Jimmy doesn't just want Chuck's pride. He wants to beat him. He doesn't just want money. He wants to be rich to match Chuck's success. But Chuck, he can't allow it. In his mind, Slippin' Jimmy can't be his equal. If he is, what does that make Chuck? All those years studying, building his reputation, crafting HHM, becoming not just a good lawyer, but a great one. Chuck worked his whole life for this. To see his irredeemable brother hit the same heights? Unacceptable. From that moment, Chuck's mission is clear: tear Jimmy down. Chuck McGill is success. He's smart, respected, at a level most only dream of. But he's not lovable. Everyone loves Jimmy McGill. Everyone respects Chuck. Everyone laughs with Jimmy. Everyone works with Chuck. Kim and Jimmy are relatable. Chuck McGill is admirable. Chuck's always been jealous of Jimmy's knack for charming people. In Season 2, we get a flashback. Chuck and his wife Rebecca prepping dinner for their guest, Jimmy. Chuck apologizes for Jimmy in advance, calling him an acquired taste. When Jimmy arrives, the three sit down, and the convo starts rough. Awkward silence takes over. So, Jimmy starts cracking lawyer jokes, poking at Chuck's profession. Rebecca's hooked, laughing hysterically at every punchline, clearly having a blast. Meanwhile, Chuck tugs his earlobe, signaling Rebecca to wrap up early. But she's all in on Jimmy, ignoring Chuck completely. Later, in bed, Chuck tries a lawyer joke. What do you call 25 attorneys buried to their chins in cement? Not enough cement. It flops. Chuck's always envied Jimmy's charisma. He hates that Jimmy makes people laugh while he only makes them proud. Charismatic's the one thing Jimmy has that Chuck doesn't, and it eats at him. Later, we see Chuck, now divorced, having dinner with Rebecca and Jimmy. Despite Chuck's new electromagnetic hypersensitivity, or allergy to electricity, things go well. Chuck cooks a killer dinner, Jimmy's a new lawyer, and Rebecca's enjoying herself. Until she gets a phone call. As she steps closer to Chuck, his allergy flares up, causing more pain with every inch. Chuck retreats to the kitchen, but Rebecca follows. In agony, Chuck snaps, grabs her phone, and smashes it on the floor. Keep in mind, Rebecca doesn't know about his condition. A quick explanation could have cleared it up, but Chuck stays silent, staying in control. Chuck's pride and ego drive his actions. In Season 3's finale, their mom's dying. Both brothers stay in the hospital for 3 days. Jimmy steps out to grab sandwiches, and as he leaves, Chuck starts crying. While he's sobbing, their mom, barely conscious, wakes up. Chuck stops crying, rushes to her side, and grabs her hand. She calls out for Jimmy. Chuck says it's him, but she calls for Jimmy again. Jimmy returns to find her dead, and Chuck in the lobby. Frantic, he asks if she said anything. Chuck lies. No. He's jealous and ashamed. Jealous their mom wanted Jimmy in their final moment, ashamed she didn't want him. His hatred for Jimmy grows here, but it explodes when Jimmy passes the bar. For 5 years, Jimmy worked the mailroom while studying at the University of American Samoa's correspondence school. He earns a law degree and passes the New Mexico bar, becoming a lawyer. He surprises Chuck with the news, and at first, Chuck acts proud, something Jimmy's craved forever. When Jimmy asks for a job, Chuck seems to guarantee HHM will hire him. But in talks with Howard, it's clear Jimmy won't be a lawyer there. Howard actually wants to hire him, impressed by his hustle. But in Season 1's finale, it's revealed Chuck blocked Jimmy's hiring. Why? Flashbacks show it. Chuck's jealous of Jimmy's charisma, likability, and people skills. He's furious he slaved his whole life to get where he is, while Jimmy took a shortcut. Chuck finds it outrageous that Jimmy, schemer, liar, exploiter, is now his peer. By Season 1's end, destroying Jimmy's legal career becomes Chuck's obsession. Chuck needs to be superior to Jimmy. So when Kim Wexler leaves HHM with her big client Mesa Verde to go solo, Chuck and Howard try to steal Mesa Verde back, and they do. They leave Kim with nothing. When it comes to crushing Jimmy, Chuck lets nothing stop him. At this point, Chuck can't enter the office without lights off and phones confiscated due to his allergy to electricity. But when a chance to hurt Jimmy pops up, he's fine. He meets Mesa Verde to win them back to HHM, lights on, electricity humming, barely affected. Why? His drive to destroy Jimmy trumps everything. Chuck's allergy to electricity is mostly psychological, not physical. It flares up when he thinks about it, but when there's a shot to tear Jimmy down, that takes priority. Chuck needs control over his marriage, his illness, his firm, his brother, his life. If he can't control something, he'll destroy it. But when Mesa Verde sticks with HHM, Jimmy schemes to return them to Kim. Mesa Verde plans to build a new bank, but before Howard and Mesa Verde hit court, Jimmy swaps the address on the documents. It could have been a minor error, and HHM might have kept Mesa Verde. But Chuck disagrees. When Kevin, Mesa Verde's CEO, confirms the address as 1216, Chuck insists it's 1216. He needs to be right to stay in control. He argues with Kevin and Paige, doubling down on 1216. This infuriates them. And worse, Mesa Verde must wait 6 weeks to reapply. They ditch HHM for Kim, who's tied to Jimmy, enraging Chuck. He knows Jimmy swapped the numbers and is obsessed with proving it. He confronts Kim and Jimmy, claiming Jimmy forged dozens of documents and covered it up. As he tries to convince Kim, she delivers the best reality check in all of Better Call Saul. After, Chuck lines his house with space blankets. Acting like he's losing his mind and legal career, he pretends his mistake and illness are crushing him, faking a need for help. He baits Jimmy into confessing that Jimmy sabotaged Chuck, and Chuck's secretly recording it. Jimmy finds out about the tape, storms to Chuck's house, breaks down the door, and screams, demanding why Chuck betrayed him after all he's done, running errands, standing by him. But Chuck planned this. As Jimmy rages, Howard and a private investigator are hiding, waiting. Jimmy steps outside, and Chuck explains why he recorded the confession, saying it's to save Jimmy from destroying himself and others. He claims Jimmy can change, become better. But in that moment, Jimmy's love for Chuck dies. Chuck betrayed him. For what? Now, Jimmy, the only one who stood by Chuck all these years, vows to destroy him, just as Chuck tried to do. And Jimmy plays dirtier. First, he hires Mike to photograph Chuck's house, showing the chaos inside. Space blankets, torn wires, madness. Then comes Chicanery, maybe the best episode of Better Call Saul. In Season 3, Episode 4, Kim figures out Chuck and Howard's plan. Focus on the Mesa Verde forgery, not Jimmy's break-in. Their goal shifts from defending Jimmy to exposing Chuck. In Chicanery, Kim and Jimmy's plan unfolds. The evidence against Jimmy is ironclad. He confessed and destroyed the proof. No way to prove his innocence, but they know Chuck wants to end Jimmy's legal career. With dirty tricks, they aim to save Jimmy and ruin Chuck. As Chuck enters the courtroom, he bumps into Huel, who plants something on him. We don't know what yet. Then Jimmy tells Rebecca about Chuck's condition, getting her to attend the hearing to rattle him. Chuck gives a near-perfect testimony, hiding his motives for recording Jimmy. But Jimmy reveals photos of Chuck's house, ripped wires, camp stoves, lanterns as the only light. He questions Chuck's condition in court. Chuck claims he senses any electricity, near or far, and it causes pain. But Jimmy reveals he's had a phone in his pocket the whole time. Chuck calls the bluff. No battery. Then we learn what Huel planted. A fully charged battery pocket in Chuck's pocket. Chuck tosses it to the ground, and the courtroom sees Chuck's condition might not be real. He didn't sense the battery until Jimmy pointed it out. But what follows breaks Chuck. He realizes he's not in control. He thinks everyone sees him as crazy. If he'd walked away, he might have won. But he can't let anyone think he's not in charge. Jimmy's plan is revealed, and it devastates Chuck. But Jimmy goes further. He wants to obliterate Chuck. He takes the one thing Chuck loves, the law. Posing as Chuck, Jimmy gets his malpractice insurance canceled, stripping his ability to practice law. Without the law, Chuck has no purpose. Without purpose, no will to live. In their final talk, Jimmy tries to fix their broken bond. But Chuck's done. He tells Jimmy he only hurts people, tears everyone down. He plants the idea that Jimmy will always harm others and should embrace it. Then, Chuck's final words to Jimmy: "You've never mattered that much to me." Soon after, Chuck sets himself on fire, ending their feud. Chuck versus Jimmy is one of Better Call Saul's most heartbreaking dynamics. Chuck, consumed by pride, ego, and jealousy, ruins their relationship. Jimmy, desperate for Chuck's respect, does anything to get it, exploiting loopholes, cutting corners. If Chuck had swallowed his pride, Saul Goodman might never have existed. If Jimmy hadn't sought revenge, he'd still have his brother. Both are wrong, both are flawed, both could have been brothers if they'd let each other live. Is it fair to blame Chuck entirely? Yes, he convinced Jimmy that Saul was his nature, pushing him to embrace it. And yes, Jimmy might not have become Saul if Chuck had left him alone. But Jimmy is responsible for his actions. He schemed, got Howard killed, not Chuck, and backed a ruthless drug lord. In the end, Chuck was right. Saul Goodman is in Jimmy's nature, but it didn't have to be. In Better Call Saul's finale, after Chuck's death and Breaking Bad's events, we get my favorite scene. Through flashbacks, Jimmy's asked what he'd change with the time machine. First, with Mike in the desert, he says he'd invest in Warren Buffett's company, a classic Saul answer. Then, with Walter White before fleeing, he mentions being Slippin' Jimmy, taking a fall that wrecked his knee, saying he'd change that. But the final flashback hits hard. A talk with Chuck from early Better Call Saul. Jimmy brings groceries to Chuck's house, and they banter as usual. But Chuck does something rare. He shows care, love. He asks Jimmy to stay, talk about his clients, his work. Jimmy says no. Chuck, fallen after, says, "That's not what I had in mind." The camera pans to a book by H.G. Wells, The Time Machine. If Jimmy could change one thing, it'd be this moment, their relationship. Despite their flaws and messy feelings, Chuck and Jimmy loved each other, at least a bit. Jimmy would give anything to redo that moment. Does Chuck deserve the hate? I think so, but no more than Jimmy deserves blame. Both were flawed, both mishandled their bond. But they cared, they loved, and that makes their story so tragic. It could have worked if they just tried. Thanks for watching, guys. I had a blast making this video and plan more soon. My stats say 99.9% of you aren't subscribed, so if you enjoyed it, a like and sub would mean the world. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.